What's up, everybody? Thanks as always for supporting the show. It would mean a lot to me if you would take a second to scroll down and hit that subscribe button to the Hoops Tonight YouTube channel, and then follow me on social media on TikTok, Instagram, and Twitter so you guys don't miss any of our content over the course of this season. All right, let's talk some basketball. First and foremost, number 20, the San Antonio Spurs. Let's take a quick look at their offseason. They lost Dominique Barlow, Devontae Graham, and Chetty Osman. They added Harrison Barnes, BJ Boston from the Clippers, Malachi Flynn, Chris Paul from the Golden State Warriors, and then in the draft, Stephon Castle, a really interesting big guard out of UConn. We covered him a lot during the draft, so you guys can go further back on our video feed to find some more content surrounding Stephon Castle. Their depth chart going into the season: at guard, Chris Paul, Devin Vassell, Stephon Castle, Trey Jones, Malachi Branham. Forwards: Keldon Johnson, Harrison Barnes, Jeremy Sohan, Julian Champagny, and Sandro, I'm not going to butcher this, so please bear with me, Mamukelashvili, okay? And then at center, Victor Wembanyama, Zach Collins, and Charles Bassey. As far as their starters, my guess is they'll start Chris Paul and Devin Vassell together in the backcourt, and then I think you'll see Harrison Barnes and Jeremy Sohan at the 3 and 4 with Victor Wembanyama at the 5. I think that's a pretty straightforward starting group with the guys that they have. I think they view Keldon Johnson more as a bench weapon at this point. Let's talk a little bit about what they do on the defensive end, and then we'll talk about the offense. So on the defensive end, they were pretty standard drop coverage team. At the tail end of the year when Mamukelashvili was playing more, they were running some drop with him as well. They were actually dropping with both him and Wemby. But with Harrison Barnes and Jeremy Sohan, my guess is what they'll do is they'll switch 2 through 4, any actions that involve those 3 players, but then they'll hedge with CP3 in any sort of guard screens where the guard is setting the screen, and then they'll drop with Victor Wembanyama. And like, even with CP3 and Wemby in actions, like, that's as good a drop coverage big you can partner with CP3 to make it easier on him. He doesn't need to be completely attached all the time. Wemby's so good at bothering ball handlers in ball screens. I think that's kind of like a nice partnership there to make an achievable defensive role for Chris Paul. They ran a little bit of zone last year. They were 12th in zone frequency. They ran 229 possessions. That was middle of the pack. The numbers are interesting because they finished 21st in defense with a 115.6 defensive rating, but they were 111.2 when Wemby was on the floor, which is really good. So, like, for perspective, the Miami Heat, who we're also going to talk about today, they were 5th in defense last year at a 111.5 defensive rating. So Wemby at 111.2 when he was on the floor basically was an elite defense. He just only played 29 minutes, and they just got absolutely thrashed every time he was off the floor. So that's why their defensive rating wasn't very good. My guess is Victor's minutes will go up this year. He played 29 something last year. My guess is he's up around 33 minutes per game this year. With Chris Paul and Harrison Barnes, just 2 savvy veterans who've been in the league for a long time, I think that'll help with consistency of effort and communication on the defensive end. So I think it's reasonable to think that the Spurs could move into that like 15 range defensively, maybe as high as 10. But in that 10 to 15 range, I think is an achievable goal for them defensively this year. Now, the offensive side of the floor is where things I think are going to shift in a big way for the Spurs. Like, adding CP3 just fundamentally alters their style, right? Because last year, this was a heavy ball and player movement team. They were 7th in passes made per game. They were 2nd in assists per game. A lot of like standard 5-out stuff. A lot of Victor Wembanyama kind of operating as at the elbow, running dribble handoffs, looking to turn and score. It was much more equal opportunity on offense. And they also ran in transition a ton. They ran in transition a ton, a lot of ball and player movement, not as much pick and roll, right? They were 16th in pick and roll frequency, 2nd in transition frequency. I expect those numbers to change with Chris Paul. I expect the pace of play to drop and them to be a little bit more methodical, and I expect them to be a higher frequency pick and roll team. And one of the main things that I'm looking for, I want to see Victor Wembanyama get more opportunities to score on the roll rather than constantly having to operate with the ball in his hands. And the guys that I look at here as examples are guys like Anthony Davis and Nikola Jokic. So like as we know, Nikola Jokic is this devastating post-up weapon, this devastating five-out fulcrum on offense, right? Anthony Davis less so in those regards, but similar in the sense that he's a screening fulcrum for the Lakers and their guards, but he's also a guy that you can run through the post. He had his best post-up season of his career, right? But what drives a lot of the success for both Jokic and Anthony Davis as offensive players is they can catch in the pocket around 10 to 15 feet from good passers that are setting them up, and the players who have the ball, in this case, Austin Reeves and D'Lo or LeBron for the Lakers, or Jamal Murray for the Nuggets. Those offensive players are high-powered enough that they pull things towards them enough that the pocket is nice and open there for Jokic and AD to get a lot of these like easy floaters and quick catch, maybe an ISO move, but like a quick ISO move when the defender, who's the screen defender, is out of position rather than squared up with them, right? Kind of a similar context to what we were talking about earlier when we were talking about King of the Court, right? And so Jokic and AD supplement their offense with all these really high quality roll touches. Victor Wembanyama last year was 16th in roll volume. So there were 15 bigs who got more opportunities to score on the roll. He only had 176 possessions all year. It's like a little over 2 a game. So like I just want to see Victor get more of those opportunities. Like Rudy Gobert had more catches and opportunities to score on the roll than Victor Wembanyama did last year. I'd like to see that number go from that 176 closer to 250, maybe even 300 for Wemby. That I think is something that CP3 can help him with. I just want to supplement, again, like we know what Wemby's upside is, but the more we can kind of like get him easier opportunities to kind of supplement his offense, that's what can lead to some really high efficiency and volume scoring seasons. I think floor spacing is going to be a big thing for this team. And I think both Chris Paul and Harrison Barnes help in a big way there. So as a team, the Spurs were 27th. So 4th worst in the league, converting spot-up possessions at 0.98 points per possession. Harrison Barnes was a 70th percentile spot-up guy last year at 1.10 points per possession. Chris Paul was an 86th percentile spot-up guy at 1.18 points per spot-up possession. Both of them shot over 45% field goal percentage on unguarded catch-and-shoot jump shots. So you just have a much higher level set of off-ball offensive players too in situations where Wemby's operating with the rock. So in summary, I think it's a substantial increase in shooting and ball handling, which obviously were 2 major weaknesses last year. Obviously, Wemby has another year of experience. We saw how well he played at the tail end of the year, which I'll give you guys that stat that I gave you the other day again here in a minute. But then he even had an impressive competitive run with FIBA, so at the Olympics. So here's one last crazy stat to kind of set the stage for the Spurs this season. In the final 45 games of the year last year, which again, that's more than half the year, the Spurs were plus 28 when Victor Wembanyama was on the floor, and they were minus 202 with him off. That's raw plus minus. So like they were positive for more than half the season with Victor Wembanyama on the floor. And then they were massively negative. And that was with a really weak roster. You're giving him a lot of veteran kind of like help this season. Obviously, he's a better player now than he was last year. So a lot to be really optimistic about as a Spurs fan. Now, as we know, there's 13 teams trying to win in the Western Conference. Teams like Houston, they're trying to win. Teams like Memphis, they're going to be right back in the mix. They weren't in the mix last year. San Antonio is trying to win. And so will they get into the play-in? We'll see. They'll be fighting in that range. My guess is they'll be in that 8 to 12 range. And whether or not they actually get in is going to come down to just how dominant Victor Wembanyama is in his second season.